Why to you is this like a good example of noir, foreign noir?
Because as you have explained to me before, the difference between foreign film noir and American film noir is that often in foreign film noir, not a lot happens. Here you do get quite a bit of plot, but it is very simple at the same time, and everything is happening underneath the surface. So for me, it's all about the emotions. It's got a strong love story to it. It's got a really compelling female character, and where it goes is so surprising. I think it's just a great example of film noir in that it takes what could be a very simple premise and makes it about something darker and something more. Also speaks a lot about society at the time, modern Paris at the time, war veterans and that kind of world weariness that they had.
Yeah.
Let the movie speak.
Bonjour, bonsoir, wherever you are. Here we are at Let the Movies Speak. I'm Justin. Travis, how are you doing?
Oui. Very good.
Yes.
I don't know any more French other
We
than
both crammed in a couple college semesters of French before this episode.
Yeah, we're going to be great.
So we are totally prepared to dissect every ounce of beautiful dialogue and the nuance in the story. Travis, that was quite an introduction there at the top of the clip that we played.
Yeah, it's from TCM's Noir Alley, which was like a series they had a while ago. And it's, one of those kind of cool talk about the movie for a minute and then play the whole movie and then they have a little outro thing. I kind of long for the days when that was what programming was, because now everything is so like a la carte. You just like scroll and eventually you just go to bed because there's something cool about the curatedness of programs like that. But I found, Justin, that little snippet of that interview to be really perplexing after having watched the movie.
Yes.
Because,
no, she makes a strong argument in the sense that she believes it strongly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think. Do you know the name of that individual, that lady that gave that opinion?
Yes.
Any idea who that was?
Her name is Alicia Malone. I don't know who that is. It's weird because if you watch that whole clip, we'll put the link in the show notes, but if you watch the whole clip, there's a guy, Eddie Muller, who's like the TCM guy in the suit who like is the main introducer. And he's like, tonight we have our own femme fatale. And then they like bring her out under like noir-y lights. And it's freaky how much her face looks like Jean Moreau's face, the female lead of the movie we watched. Yeah. So at first I was like, does she look that incredible still? Like that's bananas. And then I was like, oh no, it's just someone named Alicia Malone. I'll see if I can find anything on her, Justin, and her film. She's a film reporter. She's a TV host. She's a producer, writer, editor, and all-around film geek. And she's from Australia. So I don't know why they had her on.
No idea. She sounds less credentialed than us, right?
Yeah.
So,
perfect. Well, she's Australian, so that gives her some, the Australians are historically deep lovers of French film noir.
Right. Yeah. That was a really interesting survey. French film noir by nation.
Yeah.
Really excited to see that Klingon came in first on that.
Australia, anyway. Klingon, and then somewhere in the middling bottom, the United States of these Americas.
These United States.
Yes.
It makes, every time we say United States, it makes me want to talk like JFK. And that wasn't even JFK. That was like his
it was like after he had a stroke or something.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, we could make a joke about the assassination, but so many years later, that still seems like in bad taste.
It's too soon.
Anyway, before we get into our different take on this movie than Miss Malone, should we discuss what we watched this week?
Yes, let's do that. Why don't you start, Justin? I think yours is a little, maybe yours purports to be slightly more substantive than mine.
Ooh, definitely shot to be more substantive. I watched Spencer with Kristen Stewart in the lead role as Princess Diana of Wales. I don't know if you remember you can tell nowadays, I feel like, Travis, not just by release date, but by how trailers are cut, whether or not a studio is trying to put up a certain project for consideration of award season.
Oh, yeah. This one had it written all over the trailers and the posters. Yeah, for sure.
And my dearly beloved is a little bit of a I don't know how to say this without, let me try, Travis, and you can just correct me, right?
Okay.
You can help me make my marriage work better.
One of my favorite things to do is play marriage counselor between you and your wife, who are, as far as I know, quite happily married.
So yeah, she enjoys kind of the history of the British monarchy, right?
Yeah,
and the royals.
She's one of those.
So she knows a little bit about that stuff. And so when this trailer came out, I thought, oh yeah, maybe she'd like that. But she saw the trailer and went, which was not a good as my tone tried to convey. And I thought, okay. Anyway, so time passed, and one night it was on Hulu or somewhere. HBO, I don't remember. Anyway, we thought, well, let's try it. And at the end, the turned into a so I tried to go down half a step to show displeasure. Yeah. The problem with this movie, at least in our opinion over here, I can't speak for my spouse, but for myself, is that it plays into a couple things that are very. It's not a political movie per se, but it's playing into the current certain cultural mindsets and certain ways of making films, quote unquote, artsy, and meaningful. But in actuality, they become devoid of meaning. What I mean by that is, like in the movie today that we're going to talk about, Elevator to the Gallows, I feel like you see some seeds planted of the full-blown blossomed problems in Spencer. Yeah. It's a very self-centered movie, and I don't mean just because it's focused on Princess Diana. That's fine. And credit where it's due, Kristen Stewart does a great job. I think any accolades she received or that she gets for her performance is well earned. It's a really solid performance. But a movie is not just watching somebody act well, right? Yeah. There has to be some kind of story. And tell me if this sounds similar, Travis. Nothing changes in this whole movie. Nothing goes anywhere. And that is done so that we get lots of sequences of Diana kind of moaning and sad. And I mean, there are a couple sequences, one in particular where she plays like soldiers with her sons, William and Harry. Yeah. That's good, right? But it doesn't connect to anything else. It doesn't really say anything. And this movie is, I don't know if you remember talking about this, Travis. It probably wasn't on this show. It's probably just us in our usual pubs where we have these conversations. The Iron Lion, that's the one we're usually at, right? Of course. The Iron Lion, the pewter panda, the golden panda. Goose, all those. The troglodyte dragon. Yeah. All the classic haunts of moviegoers everywhere. But The Crown, the series The Crown. Yes. What really started, haven't finished that show. I think I watched the first 2 seasons, maybe. You kind of petered out there after the first season, didn't you? Yeah. Well, and it's just a large part of that is because it feels very slanderous. Like a lot of these people are still alive, and there's no the show, right? Just like this movie Spencer, just presents it as fact, right? Even though in the marketing in Spencer, it's like, based on a fable of a true story that could have been, it's something really out there like that. It doesn't have any meaning, right? But for the average person that sits down, they're going to take this at face value because you're making a story about, real characters and you're not Taika Waititi, right? So I think there is an expectation for people that watch a film that is purportedly about real people in real space and time that the movie is trying to convey, again, unless there's some big tell like a Tarantino movie or Taika Waititi being, funny, that the expectation is, oh, okay, this must be what happened. And so just like in The Crown, this movie makes some massive decisions, some very consequential decisions that paint certain characters in a much better or much worse light.
Yeah.
That just didn't happen, and so it feels like why did that happen? For one, because what it does is makes Diana look like a victim, and I don't know if this is just me, but that seems to be kind of a emerging protective class in our current cultural moment, where if you've been hurt by anything or anyone was ever mean to you or anything, and you've been, here's another $5 word for the day, if you've been traumatized by anything, then automatically we just need to feel sad for you. What I'm not trying to argue for is that we should feel no compassion and no empathy for people who have been through hard things. I think we always should. I think it's a very different thing when you're someone who's made really terrible decisions of your own, and then you have to live with the consequences of those.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was a bummer of a movie, man. There's like long sequences with Diana just like dancing in all these different outfits, which is like, I mean, it makes for kind of like a cinematic looking images or scenes. Yeah, I kind of struggle to even tell you now about why it's so. There's just so little to talk about, unfortunately, man.
I'm curious. So didn't you also see Jackie, the Natalie Portman?
No, I haven't seen that.
Okay,
No.
same director, and I thought maybe errantly that you had. I definitely remember you saying that looks interesting.
Yeah,
and I thought maybe you'd seen it and liked it. Same director and a very similar, like a biopic about a female world leader spouse. Of sort. Anyway, so it's just interesting that that's kind of the wheelhouse that Pablo Larraín has chosen to put himself in at the moment. But he's not doing as far as the Academy is concerned. He's doing pretty okay because he's got
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
and those
Oscar bait.
He's not going to listen to us, right? We're not going to change the course of history in that regard. But for whatever I can say to try to paint the other side, it's just like movies are more than just making interesting images, right? The days of experimenting with that kind of died in like the 20s. You know, there's an expectation that we're gonna have a film and it's gonna say something.
Yeah.
And this one just says the same thing over and over and over and over.
Well,
It's a
how
bummer.
dare you, Justin, try to hold a movie to that standard on this podcast?
Yes, I'm sorry, guys.
Okay.
Well, did you have any better luck this week?
Yeah, I would say I did. Because we are, this will be released after Halloween, but like I'm still a couple days before Halloween when I'm watching the movie that I watched this week, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to knock out another one of those Universal Monster movies that I haven't watched yet. At least I haven't seen in its entirety as a functioning adult. I probably caught pieces or maybe some of it, all of it, whatever, as a kid on AMC or TCM or whatever. So I watched the original Dracula with, Bela Lugosi. And what's really interesting, Justin, about Dracula is it came out in the same exact year as Frankenstein, which we have previously discussed on the show. And you can listen to that episode. It's in the logs. We'll put the link in the show notes. But Justin, you have a relationship with the Universal Monsters because that was a kind of a standard pop it in, throw it on kind of a thing around your house as a kid, wasn't it?
Yeah, my mom thought it was important. It might have been around the same time in the 90s that Taco Bell had during spooky season.
Yeah.
Universal Monster toys came in Taco Bell version of Happy Meals. Or
Yeah.
whatever.
I remember that.
That might have been what spurred her on. I can't remember. I was about 6 years old, and she decided oh yeah, we're going to show you these movies. So yeah, I watched The Wolfman, watched Dracula, watched The Invisible Man, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and Frankenstein. Anyway, it's been a long time. I'm not sure, Travis, if I've seen the 31 Dracula since the 90s. So what was it like as an adult?
It's good. That's what I was kind of like. This is a 31. I didn't love Frankenstein. I enjoyed watching Frankenstein just fine because, like we talked about on the episode, the production value is kind of awesome, and for the most part, until it's not anymore, and the dummy is bouncing off the windmill blade. But the overall takeaway was like they probably should have just done one of these, and then maybe the other one wait a year. I feel like they just sort of. oversaturated themselves as a studio. Dracula is so much better than Frankenstein for a couple reasons. One, it's hard to kind of square peg the round hole of like Dr. Frankenstein is kind of the villain, but kind of not. And the creature is kind of the villain, but kind of not. And so that's kind of a complicated story to try to tell. And there are times when that movie gets it right, you know, Little Girl with the Flower by the Lake. And there are times when it's like kind of confused. Like, I don't really know who I'm supposed to be repulsed by or sympathetic to or anything like that. It's also just like massive in scale. You know, you have like an entire town full of people, and some of those people actually play into the plot, and there's like a mob justice thing happening. And Dracula's just like smaller, in scale and in ability to understand how you're supposed to relate. He's just very scary, you know, and he's not sympathetic in any way. So it's kind of, I think, just easier to digest as a movie watcher. He's very, very interestingly played. The movie is very nice to look at, similar to Frankenstein most of the time. And I just think like it's an interesting movie if you watch it now, because you watch a lot of those 30s, 40s, 50s movies and the score is bananas, which we've talked about ad nauseum on this show. But this one is like largely not scored, and yet it doesn't feel like, oh, this is weird and stilted. The score is just used kind of judiciously, and when it's not used, the imagery on screen is really striking in a probably more amplified way. Like when you get to see Dracula staring into people's eyes and they put those two little beads of light right on his pupils, so they have kind of a dreamy, weird look. It's also like, I don't know, like there's some special sauce in how this story and its villain is more predatory, and like the gender dynamics play into it more. Like he does try to victimize guys as well, but it's just not the same. Like he's very seductive. And so it's creepier. It's just, I don't know, if that's what you're looking for, is a villain that actually kind of scares you and there's more stakes. I didn't even mean to make that pun. There are in fact stakes and more stakes, and I don't mean the kind that come from a cow. So it's really good, and it's only an hour and 15 minutes long, and it's just kind of like, I don't know, it kind of blew Frankenstein out of the water to me as far as like a 1-for-1 comparison. Totally worth watching, and I don't know, enjoyable. Check it out again, Justin, and reappraise.
Yeah, I think I would like to. And so as of time of recording, tomorrow is Spooktacular Day itself, All Hallows Eve. Do you have any...
Yeah.
Tradition in my house growing up then was every Halloween we either went to the movie theater if there was something to watch, or we rented something or did like Twilight Zone marathon or something. Do you have any such viewing that you now subject the next generation of your posterity to?
Yeah. Well, you know, our kids are of similar ages. So there's kind of a lot out there you can show them. And a lot you don't want to yet. So we've taken the month, the kind of weeks leading up to Halloween, and we've watched a few I would call them like, introductory things. I will say, I had my 4-year-old son, who's he's a great little dude, but he, way more than his sisters, is easily scared. He has a very sensitive temperament when it comes to scary images and stuff. So I was trying to play it really safe, and I put on for him an episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Because that is the stuff of nightmares.
Okay, you're right. You're right.
That is way worse than Dracula. Holy cow.
Yeah, you're right. And I didn't remember how actually, because I was a weirdo little kid who liked the scariest stuff I could put in my brain. So I'm like, oh, Courage the Cowardly Dog. It's silly and kind of spooky, but like it always ends fine. Everything always turns out fine.
But I don't think you were 4 when you were watching that, right? Because we're about the same age.
A little older. I'm a little older.
I'm thinking we were like closer to 10 when that show came out. Am I way off?
No, you're probably in the ballpark.
Okay.
Anyway, we watched the episode that I thought was, I remembered a couple of them that I could not put on because I was like, no, that's actually scary. And then I was like, The Curse of the Weremole. That sounds safe. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like a fantastical monster. Anyway, we watched it, and he watched it as children do sometimes, Justin. You know when you're showing your kids something and you're like, oh, I'm excited to show them this because I've watched it, whatever. And then as you watch them watching it, they just kind of stop reacting. They're watching,
Yes.
and they're not like, please turn it off, but they're just like frozen watching it, like
Yes.
enamored. And he did that thing. And I asked him a couple times, I was like, hey, dude, is this too scary? Should we watch something else? And he's like, no, it's fine. But just like deflecting. And then we finished it, and I was like, I don't know, you want to watch another one? And he was like, no, we can watch something else. And I was like, okay. That night I go to put him to bed, and oh my gosh, Justin, he's an inconsolable wreck of a human. And he's just like, and it's funny because like, I did this, it's my fault. And so he's like crying, and he's like, I don't want to go to bed. And I'm like, what is I didn't even remember what we had watched because it was so benign to me. And he was like, the weremole, and I was just like, so then I had to neutralize the threat by telling him that every time the weremole, comes into someone's house, it poops its pants, and then it's not scary anymore. And that made him laugh, and then he went to bed, and it was great. So anyway, that's been my October so far.
The old soil your drawers trick, huh? Yeah, it gets him every time.
Every time. What about you? Have you had any formative family Halloween and or spooky season experiences in the cinematic variety?
We have not. Tomorrow might be the first night, though.
Yeah.
Just because of ages again, but it's similar to, not quite as entertaining maybe as your story, but when for doing this season, we did Invasion of the Body Snatchers a couple episodes ago, and so I had my kids watching it with me. I think my oldest was fine with it. I don't know that either of them really liked it, but my youngest turned to my wife like during the when the body's on the pool table.
Oh yeah.
And she's just like, I don't like this movie. I was like, okay, yeah.
I love when kids are so emphatic like that. They're like, and we are done, sir. Right? It's so good. It's like, I'm
glad she let me know, because then that night I didn't have to deal with any scary weremoles.
She cut you off. She was like, that is enough, sir. I am finished now.
Right.
That's pretty great.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably, you can tell when a movie didn't exactly light a fire under our butt cheeks, Justin, when we take...
Because we take a century to discuss what we watch this week?
21 minutes to discuss what we watched this week, and both of them were like fine, or, yours wasn't really fine.
Well, yours sounded good.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. You should watch Dracula. And the question is, though, should you watch Elevator to the Gallows?
Well, is it over yet?
Okay, so this is the second movie we've done with a if you take the alternate title of A Matter of Life and Death, it was called Blank to Blank, Stairway to Heaven, if I'm not mistaken. And this one's called Elevator to the Gallows. And this is my first time watching Elevator to the Gallows. Justin, this is your first time watching Elevator to the Gallows?
This is my 78th viewing of this movie.
You love it then. It's your favorite.
Right. Posters in the house. We reenacted at Christmas time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That would be the weirdest Christmas pageant anyone's ever watched. You'd just be like sad and smoking cigarettes and speaking in French mumbles. I did not expect...
No, it's great. We all, in the climactic scene, we all end up around the manger. It's great.
And the manger's full of photography solution chemicals. I did not expect so much literal elevator action in this movie.
Action is maybe not the best word, but there's a lot of being in elevators in very mundane circumstances. Yeah,
not a lot of gallows and a lot of elevator stuff in the middle there. So this is if you want to get a little film nerdy for a minute, which we probably should. This is a French noir film. And when we say noir, we just mean that there's like a very specific genre of style and kind of set of stories. We've covered a couple of them in the past, like something like The Big Sleep, something like Sunset Boulevard. We've talked about has noir influence, but isn't like a pure noir. This is as pure gets for noir, Justin. And I think what's interesting about it is it's directed by a very accomplished French director, Louis Malle, who's got like an IMDb page full of credits that a lot of them are well renowned. A lot of them are, I don't know, a little groundbreaking for the time. He kind of, I think one of his earlier movies, not this one, because this was his feature film debut, but one of the other ones got one of those censorship kind of controversy waves where, you know, the American Film Association, I don't think it was the MPA. It would have been the MPAA, but the early MPAA, if I'm not mistaken, they wanted to ban it. And so it's like worth, if you're in a film class, Justin, Louis Malle probably has a paragraph. You know what I mean? He's not insignificant. This thing is very, very black and white noir. And I don't know, does it reek of Frenchness to you? You know more about French culture and society than I do overall.
Hopefully not, because that would say if this reeks of that, then it's not a culture I think many people would want to be a part of.
Yeah.
It's I mean, there are some, you can see a lot of similarities between this, I think, and Goddard's Breathless that came a couple years later. Actually, I mean, it seems like Goddard is super influenced by this feature.
Yeah, well, I don't want to cut you off, but the thing that I heard in that interview, which we got to talk about what she said in the interview when we get into what's it saying, because she's saying things that I'm just not sure it is. But this technically is a precursor to what people call French New Wave, which, you know, like Goddard and a bunch of other folks are a part. Like Breathless, I think, is one of the first of those where people are like, this is where it started. Yeah. But the thing that's weird about this movie is it was made in 1958 and it didn't get released in the States until 61. And a lot of our film history, our film historians are American, you know, at least the ones writing in English and that kind of thing. So it's just funny. You think about like film history is as much about the people who are writing it than what it's actually about sometimes.
Absolutely.
So this is definitely in the same stream, right, as like Breathless and
for
stuff
sure.
like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's definitely some, you know, culturally, I think the way, if you want to discuss or try to examine what is different about this, being a French film noir movie than American noir, I think one of the biggest tells, besides people riding scooters and that being okay, you know, not going to see Steve McQueen riding a scooter, but
that would be an amazing alternate reality where he escapes the prison
where he doesn't drive a Mustang and Bullet, he drives a scooter.
The movie's changed the name from Bullet to Vespa. Yeah, it'd be really great.
Yeah, pew pew. It is the way that police are portrayed in Elevator to the Gallows.
Yeah.
Still, it's interesting to me because it seems like in American movies, especially in this genre, when cops are portrayed, their authority comes from their physical presence, the strength of their intellect, and their ability to visit violence upon people. And while this movie, and I think others like Breathless is a little different in this regard, but what is interesting about this movie, I think, is the way that the police and the detectives are portrayed as having authority that is listened to, and it's not divorced from, but there is no need to show the capacity for violence, right? There's no like fatal gun shootouts in this movie.
Cops don't ever even pull guns in this movie, do they?
No.
They just say stuff
so
in
it's
trench
interesting
coats.
that it's like, to me, if the movie's communicating anything there, it's that the office, you know, of the government or of the municipality that they represent is so strong and so sacred that people are going to listen to them, right? Whereas in America, it's, you know, maybe on our worst days, it's very much a very individualistic culture, a very every man for himself, and so the cops got to just shoot the bad guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think there's definitely a case to be made for a very different culture being shown here.
You're meaning to say that this French movie is in fact French? Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, sir.
And it's also a little bit stuck in the post-war, you know, doldrums kind of thing. And it's a little bit, right?
And I think that's because France had the misfortune of having to go through, you know, just having a very colonial history.
Yeah.
And so, you know, in 58, the war the Algerian War of Independence is still going on. Indochina, their defeat there is really pretty fresh.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it is a culture that I think is struggling, right, to find like, okay, what is our identity? We had all these territories, and that was all okay. Even like 10 years ago, at the end of World War II, that was all really okay. Now it's not. People want to be free, and what do we do? So I think there is that. I think does seep into the subconscious of this movie, and it is interesting that the main character here is an ex-Legion paratrooper, a guy that has fought in Indochina and Algeria, or at least been to Algeria.
And it's pointed out like a dozen times. It's not like, oh, it's name dropped at the beginning and then you just sort of know that. They keep bringing it up and up. And his I'm not going to say arc, but like the plot.
His flatline.
Yeah, the plot that he walks through, if he wasn't an ex-paratrooper with some kind of training and skills and like resolve, that's a really nice way of saying it. He's also a cold-blooded killer, but like if he didn't have that background, it would make even less sense what he does in the movie and doesn't do at times. So all right, well, we need to escape this intro section out of the elevator into the wide world of the French naturally lit streets of What's It Saying. So in typical...
Here we are.
Oh, wow, it's beautiful. It's black and white, though. That's weird. In typical noir fashion, it's, Justin, I think it's a very plot-heavy movie where you got to have like a lot of little bullet points to summarize what happens, and yet not a lot happens. I don't know how that could be possibly true, but that's like... To me, it's true of some of the least compelling noir movies. It's like... You can kind of forgive that plot-heavy kind of structure when it's, a good Humphrey Bogart flick like The Maltese Falcon, and it's like there's a lot of plot points in The Maltese Falcon, but like I don't even really care what they are because the characters interacting is so compelling in and of itself. But let's try, as we talk, to kind of track with the plot. That way we'll know when we've reached the end. And oh boy, do you know in this movie. So it starts out with our two lovers, Julian and Florence. How do you say that with a French accent?
Julian and Florence.
Julian and Florence. Yeah. And she says his name so many times, and every time in the voiceover, she's like, Julian, I love you. I don't know why.
Julian Tavernier.
Tavernier. Anyway, he starts out with this very breathy, kind of intense phone conversation where they're expressing their love for each other. They're talking about, she says, like, if you're going to do it, you're going to meet me here after, and then we're going to run away together or be together. Finally, we'll be together. It's this unrequited, I don't know, there's like a little percentage of Romeo and Juliet and a little percentage of Bonnie and Clyde. And I don't know, there's some kind of mix up of all those things. And anyway, the first, let's say the first chunk of the movie, it's kind of a 3-act structure, is you find out because he does it that he's going to kill her husband, which he does. And as he is going to leave his murder operation behind, he's going to pull away in his car. He sees that he left his grappling hook and rope flapping on the railing of the floor on which he was, climbing up to. And so he goes back up to the top of this high rise, and he gets stuck in an elevator, Justin. And then there's a lot of other things that happen.
Well, don't you love that part of the murder operation, as you so eloquently put it, is that he has a grappling hook?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I get it. It's a real piece of equipment. But he goes outside, right? Like on the scaffolding of this high-rise building in the middle of downtown Paris, and just swings a grappling hook and starts walking up the side of the building.
The streets are bustling in this movie,
right? Like no one is like it's such a huge plot hole. It makes no sense to me. Like he looks around as if that's supposed to give the viewer a sense of like, oh, okay, no one's watching.
Yeah,
but there's like 30,000 people around, so I'm not sure how good of a plan that was.
Yeah, well, he does that, right? He exposes himself to the thousands of Parisian street people in order to not be seen by the two other people in the office building. He has like a secretary and like there's one other guy, and then he's like, well, I can't go past them. Then I won't have a solid alibi. Better grappling hook up the side of this very busy street, you know? Yeah, it's very weird.
I mean, seriously, if you were going to make like a comedy, like a spoof kind of this movie, you would just do that plot point exactly as it's portrayed in this movie because it's ludicrous. Agreed. It's bananas. But you know, he has to go back for something. So I guess that's what they landed on. Anyway, he goes and he murders the husband. There's the stuff that started to remotely interest me at the beginning of this part was when you hear about Mr. Corolla, who's the guy who's married to our Mr. Corolla, first name Toyota.
Mr. Toyota Corolla and his wife Florence Corolla. He's like spoken of in a very like corporate bigwig sense. And also he's called an arms dealer, and the stuff he talks about in his conversation before Julian plugs him. I don't know. It's like it starts to be interesting for a moment. He says stuff like war is not only horrible, it's a complete waste of time. I don't know. It reminded this is such a stupid poll, but you know, we got nothing else to talk about with this movie. So there's a scene in The Last Jedi where Benicio del Toro's character is talking to Finn, played by John Boyega. Yeah. And I actually really like that scene. I don't know if you like that scene too, because I know you have an aversion to how many times Star Wars allegories go back to like the military industrial complex, which I see that. It's a valid take. But I like this scene better than some of the other times the series maybe tried to do that, where he's just like, you know, whose ship are you stealing from? And then he pulls up images of, you know, the good ships and the bad ships, and he's like, see, they serve both sides. It's sort of all a big mess, buddy boy. And I don't know, there's a hint of that kind of thing in this scene where they talk for just a couple minutes, and I was like, oh, where's this going to go? Is this going to be about like some sort of principled stance where it's okay to kill this guy and go on this love affair with his wife because he's such a monstrous cog in the machine of warfare? Justin, I think the answer to that question is no, and it doesn't matter, and don't bother asking those questions.
Yes, I agree with you. It did start off really promisingly, and the boss man he's such an interesting character for like the 30 seconds of screen time we get him where he's breathing. So it's another Bryan Cranston and Godzilla problem, I think.
Yeah.
Where just killing him, it took there was real tension there.
Yeah.
And so just to kill him in the outset is like, okay, what's the tension going to be now?
Right.
And so, of course, like you mentioned he has to go back up and he gets stuck in the elevator, but the dunce cap Julian, as he was known, left his car on, and just some rando person that the script has invented for this task comes with his girlfriend and steals the car, even though they know him.
Yeah.
And they just drive it away. So it starts to feel, for me anyway, really contrived. And so, Travis, I'd be really curious to know because some other things that are like in any other movie super important happen. People get murdered. There's guns. There's car kind of stuff, like chase sort of things.
Yeah.
And none of it really, I don't care about any of it because it all feels so like fake. It just feels like a movie in the worst sense.
So I think like the thing we probably ought to like nail down at the offset is movies like this, and this one's included, are very, very nice to look at. Like there's a reason that French New Wave and movies of that ilk are like they're of value to look at from a stylistic perspective. It's a beautifully photographed movie. Like there's stuff in here that's stunning, you know, in the way that it's lit, and then the like really shallow depth of field, kind of close up, blurry back, like all that stuff. Like it had not all been done before. And so if you're watching this on mute, like if this is on when you're walking around a museum, you know, exhibit or something, like it has, I think, high value in that regard, just from a cinematography, storytelling, from pictures standpoint. But everything that you're talking about, like the things that that happen that kind of act like they matter, even if you're like, okay, I guess I'll believe that could have happened that way. They steal the car. He forgets the grappling hook. The little girl finds the rope with Florence there. All this stuff is like, I don't know. There's no real point to it, and the way the movie finds its cul-de-sac ending is so emblematic of that like, I don't know. It's one of those movies that's frustrating because I wish movies that looked this good had any degree of proficiency in like laying out the breadcrumbs and then having it pay off in the end. There's just weird stuff in this movie. So like you alluded to, we have our A plot, which is Julian and Florence and like their quest to kill the husband and be together. And then there's this B plot, which dominates really like the whole middle part of the movie because he's stuck in the elevator forever, of Louis and Veronique, which is like some French version of Veronica. Weird, those French people having their own
some
some
the
weird
English version is the correct version.
No, I mean I
Stupid
think
French people.
we can all agree on that. Anyway, they are like young and also in love, but they steal the car, and I don't know. Like again, a character like Louis is like, he's kind of compelling because he's just like, he's full of anger and rage, and he doesn't like treat her in any respectable way, and yet she's drawn to him. So there's that interesting kind of like, you know, ill-advised love sort of dynamic happening. But like, what the heck does it matter if they steal the car, they go to a hotel, they have champagne with some Germans, he goes crazy because he flips out, thinks he's going to get caught, he shoots the Germans, they end up on a bed together attempting suicide, but they don't die. And you know what I mean? Like there's stuff happens in this movie that just wouldn't happen. People talk in ways that people wouldn't talk. I mean, the couple lines of dialogue that I wrote down that just like, they scream unbelievability at times. Just, this is a really badly written movie in a dialogue sense, like almost always, I feel. But people say things like, strange, he never locks it, you know, out loud, like when he's looking at a door. Like, right. That's not, people don't say that out loud. And like the other thing that made me laugh was eventually, after Julian gets out of the elevator, makes his way out of the building, he goes to where his car was, like it would still be there, like a full 12 hours or whatever later. And was it even more than that? They ask him like a billion times in the interrogation scene.
It's like a day and a half or something ridiculous.
It's forever. It's like, I'll just
plenty of cigarettes in the hotel, in the elevator, but I don't see any cups of, you know, just saying. Just another problem.
Go watch The Aviator if you want to know what we're talking about. He goes to get his car, which is presumably still there, just idling, and he goes, the cops took it. Out loud with his face whole. Like, I'm just so there's all the
it's like something Conan O'Brien would say in a sketch.
Yeah.
You know? Looks like the police got my car.
Yeah. I don't know. Anyway. So nobody has, I think my main contention, Justin, I'm going to throw this out there and I want you to just take it and give me your take on it. Noir has been accused, and sometimes very rightly so, of being like emotionally vacant and not resonant, and characters seem detached from real human emotion. This is so that. It's like 1,000% that. No one really emotes other than like people like the Germans that they run into and have champagne with. And to me, what's weird about this one is sometimes that's okay because the plot is like bubbling and buoyant enough and that you're like, oh, I just want to see where this thing goes. Or some of the candor back and forth is like so snappy and interesting. This has none of the candor. This has no consequential plot mechanics by the time you get to the end. And it's all kind of the same soup of, it looks pretty and yet nothing is really happening or matters. I don't know what to do with a movie like that.
I think the answer to that is the old parable: if the soup loses its soupiness, it is good for nothing.
Yeah, of course.
And this movie soup is it's so bland. I think you hit the nail on the head with being emotionally vacant, because at first blush, the Benkers, the German couple that end up being murdered, they appeared to me at first to be compelling, and that was because they were actually laughing and expressing normal human emotions.
Yes, they acted like humans for a little bit. Yep.
Everyone else is a little bit Invasion of the Body Snatchers pod people.
Uh-huh.
And it's just painful to watch. So as soon as I realized, oh, these people, it's not that they're interesting, it's just that they're emoting, which is just refreshing because they're actually trying to affect like human beings. Then they became not interesting, and then I didn't even have to worry about it because they were gunned down because they weren't pod people also.
Right.
So yeah, it's a bummer, man, because even at the end, it ends like it begins, with, you know, this sort of like, oh, we're so in love with each other, but not really. I mean, it's not convincing. It's just platitudes.
Yeah.
Platitudes in the Phone Booth, a new collection of poetry by Julian and Florence.
Oh, boy.
And it ends that way too, man.
Yeah.
She is just the cop's like, hey, check it out. You're probably actually going to get a much worse penalty than Julian.
Yeah.
Because you were not just an accessory to this, but he's going to have some sympathy, maybe for being a soldier, maybe because he made a lot less money. He's not wealthy. Who knows? That's not really answered, so I can only kind of guess as to why that is. But then she says, "Oh no, it's okay. I did it for love, and one day we'll be together again." And it's like, well, I mean, it's just, it leaves you with nothing, man. There's nothing to go on.
Yeah. There's moments that are like so much more frustrating to me. Like I when I got to like 20 minutes from the end of this thing, I wrote down in my notes like, there's no like possibility of any of the 3 or 4 ways that this could go down. Like everybody gets gunned down or the cops lock up. Like there's no ending to me that's going to feel at all satisfying, because they've made it so clear that like the thing that we long for in movies, which is to like see people connect and relate to a character and then like have a reaction to wanting them to succeed or fail, you know, like none of that is happening while I'm watching this. And so I'm just like, oh, so whatever happens at the end here, I'm going to be really annoyed by. There's like this moment near the end where Florence is, you know, doing what she's doing the whole movie, looking for Julian, and she goes up to the flower lady, and I think the flower lady knows that her husband's quote unquote committed suicide at this point. So she's like, "Would you like an azalea?" And I'm like, oh, somebody is being kind. Whoa, something's happening here. And then like that conversation is like 12 seconds long, and she goes, "Oh, these ones are a very beautiful yellow color," and she's gone. It's like, this is the movie right here. Like someone trying to emote and relate and create a connection. And I don't know, like there's no there as far as caring about anyone or anything that inevitably happens. Do you think that there's some things, you know, if we just want to like strip away the fact that this is not really an enjoyable movie to watch for those reasons that we've laid out, what about, Justin, some things like technically or visually that you saw that you were like, okay, that is pretty cool, or like there's some value here or there? Did you have any moments while you were watching it like that?
Yeah, you have Miles Davis composing some of the music for this movie.
Oh,
so
I almost forgot, which is saying something.
I mean, and it's he did it supposedly right in one session, like they just watched the movie and made some jazz up while they were doing it. So it's not like, you know, the best Miles Davis stuff you've ever heard, but it's still Miles Davis, and it works for the movie. But to me, even the music, although it's Miles Davis, he's out of this world, but that kind of approach to this movie seems to have been the approach all over. In other words, hey, let's just do Miles Davis, just come for an hour and just do your thing, and that'll be good enough. Yeah. So no, like instead of someone pushing him, right, or saying like, hey, this was good, but I want another take. Like, can we do this again?
Yeah.
I have no idea if that was possible or if he was horrible to work with. I'm just saying that this movie should have happened in this movie from the script writing stage up until production. Yeah. So all we get that is pretty to look at, in my opinion, is just stuff that is more like by accident, or more stuff that they just thought up as they're shooting. Yeah. You know? Just like, oh, well, what if we try lighting like this? I just can't believe that this movie came to being because they're like, I have no story, but I have a really interesting idea for a depth of field shot. Yeah. What do you think? Want to go make a movie together?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's usually not how movies are made. So I just find it a big bummer that there are. I do really like the sequence at the end, or the at least the idea behind the sequence of how it's revealed that the police found out that Julian and Florence are in love, or that they conspired to murder. That's probably the more important thing that the police are interested in. So that reveal of, like, you see the photo being developed, that is super cool. But all it is a cool idea. It's not a cool execution. So even the stuff that I would really, that this movie gets accolades for, to me, it's just it's kind of empty. Yeah. Because there is nothing being said with all of that together. But what about you? What stuck out? What was really attention grabbing? There's like two things that I would say like worth YouTubing because they're just pretty. The one shot that I really like is I think it's him. He reads the newspaper after the father and daughter are like seeing his face, and the little girl's Daddy, going, that's the man.
Yeah. And there's a really cool pullback shot of him in the cafe that just gets wider and wider. And that's the one time where the visual storytelling actually, it's almost like pre the dolly zoom from Jaws, on Roy Scheider when you notice it's something like that in that moment, it's like, okay, if you realized you were being hunted, like you came out of this elevator after a day and a half and then you were like, oh, I'm a wanted man. That might be a visual representation of what it feels like. So that looked cool. There's the interrogation sequence is very, very cool looking. I mean, like it's kind of monotonous and it doesn't do anything. Like they don't get any information out of him. That is of substance that I can remember, but it does look like things that are going to come way later. If you watch Get Out or you watch Stranger Things, there's this visual, I don't want to say motif. It's like a trope at this point of like some people in a black blank space. So if you like watch Stranger Things and you watch people walking around in the, it's technically the upside. Well, it's like Eleven's view of like moving through time and space, and she can see things, but they can't see her. It looks really cool. And you watch this interrogation sequence and there's no room, there's like, they're not in any tangible walls and space and whatever, but every time they step into the light, they're there again and then they're gone. And it looks very eye catching. But again, just like you said, Justin, with everything here, it's like a sandwich with no meat or lettuce or anything of flavor on the inside. It's just a couple of croissants and a big old cloud of poop in the middle. I don't know what I'm saying.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, I think perhaps we should answer the question of is it worth our time and really surprise people?
You're going to be shocked. Why don't you go first, Justin? Is this worth your time or anyone else's time?
As the French say, non. It's not. I mean, the only person that's going to be even probably interested in this movie is someone that is interested in cinema.
Yeah.
For historical or hobby reasons or whatever.
Academic reasons I could see, academic reasons.
If it's forced upon you in a college level course, then go for it.
It won't be the worst thing you are forced to watch in Freshman Film 101 or something like that.
No, but it's not a good movie. So thankfully, Louis Malle did do some good stuff after this. And I don't want to be. I think it's fair to say that this is this guy's first feature length movie, right?
Yeah.
So, Travis is people that have not made a feature length movie. I'm sure it's very difficult, and there's for most people that aren't Albert Einstein. What a great filmmaker he was. But for most people that aren't supernaturally gifted in the way of filmography, it's an incredibly difficult thing to make a movie. And so I'm glad that he was able to go on and make some really good stuff. And I don't mean to say like this is the worst movie ever or something. It's not even necessarily a bad movie.
Yeah.
I think it's ultimately more disappointing because there's enough good ideas, there's enough interesting shots.
Yeah.
There is a good enough score that it makes you realize something much better could have been done with this. Mm-hmm. But all we're left with is kind of this milquetoast movie. How about you, my friend?
Yeah, much the same. I mean, like, I half expected to come into this conversation, Justin, and just because, like, we both, like, when we love noir, we love noir. It's so good when it's good.
Yeah.
I know you have a special place in your heart for some things that are French, like the language and some of their, literature and film and whatever. But like, I'm kind of fascinated that we have brought this down to the level through discussing it of like, that's the lowest common denominator. I don't mean to diss on what you just said at all. I just mean, it's like really quite unenjoyable when the thing that Justin is saying in his "Is It Worth Your Time" is, well, folks, what can I say? He made a movie. It's like, I agree 1,000%, but man, that is it. That's all there is. And so there's a couple things here that I think are really wasted. The idea that you would have like an ex-paratrooper as your main character and not maybe they weren't equipped, or whatever, but like they put it out there so many times, it's just not explored. Like there's no pre-PTSD kind of like exploration of that kind of thing. And there were movies of this time and before it that are trying. I think of what's the other French war movie we did in the 30s, Justin?
The Grand Illusion.
Yeah, movies like that do a much better job, a much earlier, of at least touching on like the people inside of the war machine and how it affects them and that kind of thing.
Right.
And I think the moment in this movie that I realized it's really a movie that is trying so hard to look beautiful and not messy, but as a story and as a viewing experience is incredibly messy and frustrating, is when they're drinking champagne with the Germans. You've got Louis and Veronique and
Veronica. Archie and Veronica.
They're drinking champagne with the Germans, and like you said, there's some sense of life to those characters because they're acting like real humans with emotions. And then the Miles Davis score, which should be this movie's like absolute cherry on top of the cake, is just like blasting. It's just like, and it's like nothing is happening to justify what is probably some incredible music. So like you have this genius, auteur, the best trumpet player maybe to have ever walked the face of the earth. And then you have this kind of good looking movie, and together they make each other worse. That's how there's some level of inefficient process or lack of full artistic vision. So yeah, it's really of all the movies we have reviewed, this one feels like, it's only like 90 minutes long. And man, I've watched 2.5-hour movies for this podcast that feel shorter. It's just like, it feels like
absolutely
one of the biggest wastes of time, in some ways, because it just doesn't reward in any way, shape, or form.
I think it's perhaps the most frustrating movie we've discussed.
Yeah. Even more than The Big Sleep, Justin?
Touche.
We're going to tag Annie. We're going to tag Annie in the audiogram this week on Instagram. It's like, this clip right here where I asked Justin, that should be the bar. We have the Schindler's List, we name drop Schindler's List as far as rewatchability. And this one is it as frustrating as The Big Sleep?
It's not.
Okay,
but it is frustrating in its own unique circle of hell kind of way.
I think it's the worst of what noir has to offer. To me, it is. It's emotionally vacant in a way that is not justified or sort of outweighed by other things. It is far more concerned with drumming up an atmosphere with voiceovers and weird, like long dolly shots of people walking through the street and thunderstorms that are heard and almost never seen. These are all just like tools that are used to try to create an atmosphere. And if you have atmosphere with no substance, it's just like it really is a waste of someone's time. Okay, so no, it's not worth your time. We don't say that very often, and this one just really isn't. It's not a high rewatchability rate at all, I don't think, unless the only
it's a zero.
It is a zero, unless the only thing you ever watch is French New Wave, French noir, film noir, whatever. And even then, it's like
they turned off this podcast a long time ago.
Yeah, they were like, they're doing Baby Driver. No, The three things, Justin, that this movie did give me. These are the three things. Here you go, folks.
The willies.
Not even. I wish. Number one.
That was Courage, the cowardly dog.
Courage, the weremole was way scarier than anything in this movie. One is the fact that that little tiny spy camera could take such amazingly professional photographs. That's number one.
That is amazing.
Number two.
What is the millimeter of that film, by the way?
I don't know.
1 millimeter film.
Half of 30 seconds.
Half of 3/4.
Number two, valuable thing that this movie gave me, other than the amazing photographic clarity of the pictures of the tiny camera, is I now know what Gardinal is, which is it's a sedative for treating epileptic seizures. That's what they try to kill themselves with and fail. I don't know why that happens.
It's phenobarbital, isn't it?
I don't know.
Or okay, sorry.
Sure. I wish I had some phenobarbital when I was watching this thing. And number three is having perused Louis Malle's IMDb filmography. I want to go watch Atlantic City, which came out in 1980. Is rated R. It has Susan Sarandon, Burt Lancaster, Wallace Shawn. That looks interesting, and he's a good enough visual stylist where I'm like, I want to give that one a whirl. All right, Justin. I think I still stand by that. Overall, this series has been more hits than misses compared to our previous seasons. Yeah.
I think so, although that's diminishing. This really brought it down several pegs.
The last few we've had a few more duds, but you know what? You can't win them all. And next week, I think we are going to turn a corner for something at least completely different from this week, which is Some Like It Hot, a comedy. It's been a while since we watched a comedy.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I haven't seen this one before.
Okay, and I've seen it a long time ago, but we'll see if we like it hot. Bye.
Let the movie speak.